Hey. So I'm John from Nickland Gaming, and I wanted to talk today about JSON. So, JSON is just a way of writing and reading. Uh, yeah, pretty much like any of your MLA formats that you learned about in school. However, JSON is more for computers to read than humans. Now, let's see. According to Google itself, JSON is just a format that is easy for humans to read and write. And it's also easy for machines to parse or read and write this as well. So, yeah, pretty much that's all JSON is. Now, why do we want to know JSON? JSON is great for storing and reading data on a computer um, or any computing device, I suppose. Um, Now, with me, I use JSON very often with my programs and applications that I create. So currently, I create programs in Unity. However, in the past, I've also created uh, Python applications using PyCharm. I've created Android applications using Android Studios, which runs on Java, so Python, Java, and C Sharp from Unity. And in all of these languages, I've used JSON as a way to store data. So, one of the very great things about JSON is you can flatten it to a single line of text. Sometimes a very large line of text, but a single line of text. Um, and that's great for saving the data. In Unity, they have a thing called player preferences, where you do player preferences dot set string and get string, which lets you save a single string of information. For those of you who don't know what a string is, it's just text, numbers, symbols, things like this on a computer. And that is called a string. Whereas things like an integer would be an integer value like 12, or a decimal or a double or a float will be something like a floating text number with a decimal in it. They do also have decimal too. Now, JSON would store the data as a string, however, it can hold any data type there is, even other JSON objects. Um, Now, why do we want this? So, for example, I am currently developing a new alarm clock for the Android device. And in my alarm, I have, of course, I store the user's alarms. Like I say, oh, hey, this alarm is going to go off at 5 o'clock on Monday and Tuesday, and there's a second alarm that will go off on 6 o'clock on Wednesday. Now, how would I store that data? So maybe I can create a whole text document that will say 5 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, and then 4 o'clock, say, Tuesday. And I would just have all of my alarms like this. Then I can go into my C Sharp and I can say string G just to represent this text up here. And then I say G dot split by the new line character, and then it would split it up by the new lines. And then I can go further and I can do, okay, let's say A equals G, then I say B equals A at 0 dot split by the single space character. Now, A would equal, oh yes, and let's grab at 0. So now A would equal 5 o'clock Monday, Wednesday, and B would equal, and let's set that to, set it to 1. Now, yes, now A is just a single thing. Okay, and now B would be equal to the number 1, so 0, 1, which would be Monday. And then I can plug this into my object, so I can say time object t equals new time object, which is object that I have created myself, not a default object in C#. And then I would just say, this would be A at 0, A at 1, and A at 2 to kind of say that this is 5 o'clock and then these are all of the days. Now, I'm sure you're noticing that this can take a lot of time. There are many issues with this. What if you have n number of days? It's just very error prone, and if there's a single spelling error as you're editing the text, then everything is just destroyed. Now, this is where you don't ever want to store any data as a text document like this. You instead want to use something like JSON. Now, for this example, I would actually like to use an issue that my friend is having. My friend is currently developing his own role-playing game where he has dialogue. Now, in his dialogue, he'll have things like the player A talking with NPC A, and they have these set lines that they each say, kind of like you're reading a movie script. Now, what happens if you are creating your game and you're like, you know what, I need some magical object in my game. Let's have a golden staff. The whole concept of the game is to hunt for this golden staff. And so you're going through in all of your texts and you're saying blah, 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 golden staff. And then in another scene, blah, 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 golden staff, blah, 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 blah. And this is all spread throughout your scenes in Unity. It's all jumbled up. And then, maybe a week later or a month later, you decide to make a major design change because maybe your artist said, you know what, that golden staff is just way too hard to handle. I would prefer if I can create a silver sphere instead of a golden staff. I can't draw a staff. And you're like, you're my artist, why can't you? And so you're like, okay, we'll change golden staff to silver sphere. Well, now you have to go through every scene in Unity, through all of your scripts, all of your objects, all of your game objects, your text, and you have to change golden staff to silver sphere. And this can create many issues. Maybe you get 99% of them, but then players can come across this huge bug where all of a sudden you're referring to some golden staff and everyone's like, what's the golden staff? I thought the magic weapon was the silver sphere. What happened to the silver sphere? Why is NPC 95 talking about a golden staff when I should be going off to Zanzibar to get the silver sphere? And so what I say instead is to use JSON in this case to store all of your text in the game. And this would help with editing. This would help with creating a new language. This would help with spell checking because now all of your text is in one place and you just pull it out of your JSON object. Now that's enough talking about what JSON is and why we would use it, how we can use it. I would like to talk about the format. How does JSON actually look? Now, of course, you can go to your favorite web browser and just type in Json Format, and you can look up some things like jsonformatter.org. They would have some things like W3 Schools, Wikipedia, but this has never been adequate for me. This has never been enough because it never tells you all of the things that you can do with JSON, and you can do a lot with it. Now, typically the first thing that you want in JSON are these two curly brackets here. Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. Yeah, let's zoom you up to 250%. So you need these two curly brackets to start off your JSON. As great of a website this is, it is still a bit buggy. So let's refresh this. Go back to 200. Okay. So now I've got the two curly brackets. And then everything is stored in a value pair. And usually, or key value, sorry, a key value pair. And usually the key should be wrapped in parentheses. However, it does not have to be. So this is the key, and then you use a colon, and then you have the value. So this is what's known as a key value pair, and value does not have to be a string like this. It does not have to be text. It can be anything you want. So I can instead say key 1, and then I will have the value as 12. Or I can have another long named key, and this value will be 55.4. And maybe I want to see, I will say test for null in JSON, and I'll just set it to null and see what happens. Now, with this website that I really enjoy, you can use it if you want. It's very reliable. It's been around for many years, at least 6, with absolutely no change, which I love. But it's called jsonviewer.stack.hu. The HU, I assume, is its country name, maybe Hungary or something. But you type in the text and then you click viewer. The only problem is you can't paste on a mobile browser, which sucks. Yeah, then you go to viewer and yeah, it looks perfect. So we have the key string value. Key 1 to 12, another long named key, 54. And then the test for JSON null is null. So this actually works. And this even color codes it to tell you what type of data it is. So the blue would be for the string, the green would be for the number, and then the red is for an error or a missing data. Now, if this was all JSON could do, that would really suck. And thankfully, it's not. Now, test without parentheses, just to see if it would handle the name. Now, one of the great things to do with this website, jsonviewer.stack.hu, is you can test and see if your JSON is actually working. So I will test and see if we can use a name, which I'm pretty sure you can, without parentheses. I think the only time you really do have to have parentheses is when there are white spaces in your name, but we can test that too. And then we'll just say string. Then we go over to the viewer, and it looks like it has thrown an error. So now we add the parentheses back, or add parentheses. Yep, so we do need the parentheses there. And what about in our value here? Yep, so it's always best to just toss in parentheses. If you ever have any questions about it, don't ask me, don't ask Google. People are wrong. Go to your JSON editor and actually try it. Try and make the mistake, you know. I see too many people asking really basic questions. It's like when you were 5 years old and you ask your parents, what's 5 times 12? And they say, well, I don't know what 60 is. Is it 60? God, I hope it's 60. No, it can't be 60. Let's see. 24, 48. Oh, yeah, it is 60. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, they would say, just go to your calculator. And this is the same thing. If you have a problem with programming languages or anything on the computer like JSON, go and test it out. There have been many times during my education in university where my teachers would say, this is not possible. And I'm like, but teacher, here's an example. It is possible, but it's not pretty. But yeah, I'm getting off track. Another two things that you can do in JSON is you can have, so this is all considered one object. You can see it in the viewer right here. This is our JSON object. Now, inside of an object, you can actually have nested objects. Oh, also, you do not need the comma at the end. It would still work. However, best practices that I was taught say to add a comma at the end, just so it's easier to continue on with the next line. Kind of like in Python programming. But what I was saying is another thing that you can add to JSON is you can add other objects and you can add arrays. So here I will say object 1 and then my colon, and then how do you make an object? Well, just like this. So I will add the curly bracket, the closing curly bracket, and then I will say another key and value. You can even have these nested objects as deep as you want. So nested 2 and then another object with nested 3. I know my naming's not proper, but oh well, with deep nested value. Yes, now if I go over to my viewer to look at that, you can see that I have object 1, key value nested 2, and then nested 3 with a deep nested value. So you can have objects inside of objects inside of objects with even more. You can keep going on and on, not into infinity, but into your device's limits. There's no infinity in programming. We're just limited by the device that you are expecting to run this on. Now, on top of object 1, here I'll even add it into object 1. I will add, let's say, array 0. And now you can have an array of anything you want. So, and these do not have these are not key value pairs, these are simply values. So I have 2, 5.5, a string, another 3, maybe I have another array of 1, 2, 3. Maybe I have an object of nested 5. And then let's end it with 0.001. And then let's go over to the viewer. And you can see in object 1, there's nested 2 and then array 0. In array 0, there's 0. Oh, sorry. The first element, well, 0th element, the first element, second, third, fourth, fifth, and then the 6th. Now, if you look, the 4th element is 1, 2, 3, 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be my array of 1, 2, 3, and then we have my object of the key value pair. So my array of 1, 2, 3, and then the key value pair. And that's JSON in a nutshell. Now, one final thing I want to add to this video is, well, how do I apply this to the idea that I had at the beginning of the video of using this with dialogue? So pretty much you just need to label all of your dialogue. Maybe you want to and decide how you want to order your dialogue. Maybe you want to order the dialogue by the chat. Maybe you want to order the dialogue by who says it. Maybe you want to order the dialogue by just a default number of when it was written down. Now, I say the best way to order the dialogue is by giving proper labels to the dialogue that happens. So say, and then use objects and nested arrays to have the different dialogues in there. So say I have this array of the opening scene dialogue. I think there's a UE in some spellings of it. Now I will have my object, and then in here I have, well, from here it can either be an array of things that people say, or it can be what the people say. So I have the opening scene dialogue, and then I will have maybe an on-load script, and this will be an array where we have hello hero, we say things to get you acquainted with the game. So that's just your dialogue that loads up, your typical hello hero, X is to walk, Y is to do this, or whatever controls you want to display. And then in your opening scene, say you have a couple people that are walking around. So I will say, I don't know, maybe you're in a field. So I say, kid 0 dialogue because you don't want the kid to say the same one line every single time. And even if he does only have one line, you still want to track that. So the first time you talk to the kid, he will say, "Wow, you're a hero." Or, then the second time you talk to him, he says, "You're a wizard hero." And he'll just switch between these two or pick a random dialogue every single time. But you come along a month later and you're like, "You know what? I don't like this line right here. I want it to say, I am hungry." So the kid says that, then we have another person. Maybe there's also Farmer Tom, who will have his lines as well, and he will say ABC just because he's a farmer, maybe can't talk very well. And then you just have all of the things like this. Now, this is the opening scene dialogue. Maybe you have City Zero. Oh, we got to remember the parentheses of ours, or quotation marks. Quotation marks. And then in the City 1, you will, of course, have, like in most RPGs, you have Guard 0, and he will have his array of things. He will say, "Well met. I used to be a ... until I got an arrow." And yeah, it just goes on like this. And then when you go into your actual game engine, whether it be, or development engine, whether it be Python or Unity or Android Studios or Unreal, whatever it is, you just connect these the key value pairs, with your text box that is displaying this text. And so you come along and you're like, "You know what? Well met. I don't really like this. I want to say instead, not very well met." And then you can have it like that, very easily done. Or say you want to change it to a different language, instead of well met, you want to make it Vietnamese, so you can say "Xin chào." Or, this way you can translate it too. And yeah, there's my basic JSON tutorial. I highly recommend that you use JSON in any of your programming projects if you want to preserve data. Even if you're simply using JSON to load something like this script, simply toss a JSON file into your project and it can make editing and fixing errors so much easier, because otherwise you would have to go through and find all of these lines, and that would make it much, much more complicated. So we're done with the video. I hope that this has been educational for you. I hope it's inspired you to try and introduce JSON into your game. If you're already well acquainted with JSON, then hopefully this gave you some new ideas. And I look forward to hearing about and seeing what you have created with this. So, have a great day and goodbye.